let's start off. Give me the current state of WeWork, because you were telling me before at lunch, like the size of this. What is going on?
Well, we've got 143 locations, I think, as of a couple of days ago, and that's global, spread across the world. China, Korea, Australia, South America, obviously across the US and also through Europe and Israel. And it's become a global network, over 100,000 members, and companies of all shapes and sizes, everyone from the single entrepreneur up to now large companies, Fortune 500 companies that are putting in divisions or portions of their workforce. And so it's become incredibly diverse community made up of all kinds of people doing all kinds of things.
And you mentioned when I think of WeWork, I always think of startups, freelancers, a lot of upstarts, but you have a large amount of enterprise clients, like big names. Kind of tell me like who they are and like why do they use a WeWork instead of using a headquarters or having their own offices? They can definitely afford it.
I think everyone, we celebrate here at Collision as well as in many other venues the small business and the energy of the startup. There's certainly something that comes from companies that are in that stage where they're growing and changing and evolving, and like they have a lot of questions to ask. They're trying to figure out who they are, and they're taking on big challenges. And I think that energy we're all in some ways inspired by and addicted to and engaged with. Big companies want that. They want to feel that same energy, and some probably have it and some don't. The ones that don't, it may be hard to transform a culture of 10,000 people or 20,000 people or whatever, and especially to try to do it all at once. And so what we've seen is some really cool examples where a large company is putting an innovation division or a digital department inside of a WeWork, and they may have 300, 400, or 500 people, and that group is engaging in a new environment, which is different from the other one, and also hopefully they're inspired by all those small companies and the energy that's surrounding them.
Do a lot of times these companies, do they have another office in the same city that this kind of like innovation kind of skunkworks is in?
Yeah, I think there's so many different configurations. It could be that they do have another local office and they're perhaps putting a division. There's also cases where it's the branch office and say the home office is in another place. So I think the configurations come in many different forms. We also see people who are looking for a flexible solution. So Microsoft, for example, has an office in New York City, but they're allowing a bunch of their employees to use WeWork locations across the whole city, which from a functional perspective is pretty cool, because if you're doing a bunch of sales meetings, why go all the way back to the home office when, if you have a break between, you could pop into, one location for a couple hours. So all kinds of configurations, that's part of the benefit of this flexible environment.
And you mentioned that, that a lot of these big companies want the energy of their employees to be with startups and founders and vice versa. How do the two groups interact? Like if you have a bunch of startups on like this side of the floor, then you have 500 people from Microsoft on the other. What is that culture like?
Well, I think the thing that's great, and what I think we all hope for, is that people are people, and no matter whether you work for a big corporation or you're a startup, you can find things in common. And so I think in our common areas especially, and the simplest of means, waiting in line for an espresso or whatever is a great time to meet someone new, or preparing your lunch in a common area, just hanging out. Those are the times when people are detached from their normal workflow and have the opportunity to perhaps just run into someone and start a conversation. And I think in that context, that's where we want to foster this really cool, open, fun environment, because then people are more open to that. And we sort of think, if you're happy, you're more likely to have a positive interaction. So the things that we do with our spaces to design them in a way that feels, fun and inspiring and cool. It's not just because they look cool in an Instagram photo or whatever. It's because we really think they affect people's soul in a way, and everyone deserves to have that, uplifting spirit.
So you guys are helping steer what the modern office, what the modern workspace looks like. What makes a great workspace these days? What are some things you focus on specifically that make people want to go there, and how is that different than a traditional way of?
Well, one thing which I think gets, I think we see this evolution towards density, and density is something that is a complex topic because, everyone responds to people being close to them in a different way. But certainly the energy that comes from more people in a small space, you feel that, and then, when people are working hard and they're passionate about what they do, and then they are close enough together that their energy sort of bumps up against each other, that creates a vibe that is much different than, say, a big office where, people have a lot of space between them, where utilization is low because, half the time, half the desks are empty. And, most people have been in a workspace and seen that sort of like open, sort of wasteland of people quietly working. It may be fine for some people, but at the same time, it's like if you want to feel that energetic vibe, you need to purposefully create it. It doesn't happen by accident. So we're very specific about the ratios in terms of density, about the common areas that we develop, how many of them there are, how large they are, specifically because we feel like those formulas result in this energy level. And so, translating that to other environments is where our next sort of frontier challenge is, because we have to say, well, that works when you put it here, but what happens if, say, you try to do it, in an environment that perhaps we don't totally control?
I'm just curious, how many people in this audience have worked out of a WeWork before? Show of hands. Very
nice,
cool.
Thank you, appreciate it.
How many people hate their office space? Not at WeWork, but just in general right now.
Very few. That's good.
That's good. In terms of how do you design a common space, or you design like a feature or to put into all the WeWorks, what is it like how do you come up with the ideas, and how do you experiment? Do you kind of beta test it in certain places before you implement it, kind of
Yeah, I mean,
nationwide?
what's amazing because of the volume, with 143 locations, and now we're opening anywhere from 10 to 15 a month, we run our development almost, like a software company. So, we're iterative. We have a product. We think of it as a product. So our team is, developing a product, and there's different people responsible for different components, and they're all iterative. So each version is sort of released in a new way, and we're looking at the way things perform. And we've done things like, the way the Uber app was, where after you have a ride, you have to rate it. We did that with our conference rooms, for example. So after you use a conference room, what did you think about it? What were the positives and negatives? So, we have product owners. We have people who are trying to make the spaces as good as they can be. And then we're also looking at it collectively in terms of what do people need as a suite of sort of services. So, I mean, there's some times where you want to have a private conversation. Sometimes you want semi-private. Sometimes you want, to be out in the open. And what's the right mix of those components? And a lot of it is, just observation. I mean, some of it is scientific, where we actually, put a camera, we watch how people use the space, and we sort of develop heat maps that show. And oftentimes we're releasing something and then changing it a few days later after it's released, so in the next version it's updated.
Do you have any favorite kind of fails that you tried to put in and didn't work out?
Well, what's weird is like a lot of the things that we think about in terms of like specialization oftentimes aren't needed. So technology is one of those ones that's really tough because everyone's on a different platform. Some people say with like video conferencing, you would think that one of the most powerful things would be from location to location communication, facilitating that. But the reality is like some people are using FaceTime, some are on Google Hangouts, some are on whatever platform, and some on Skype. And it's like, so you can't make it's not like a company where you can force everyone to use the same platform. So some of the challenges are like, because everyone's doing their own thing and has their own working methods, just making sure you have like the right cables in place to connect, a computer or whatever. Those challenges can derail things that might seem like a really good idea. But also, I would say there are also use cases that people use. So we have phone booths. For those of you who have been in a WeWork, you've probably been in a phone booth. Very small room, much too small for me actually, being an extra large person. But I feel almost uncomfortable inside a phone booth. But yet we've seen people have two-person meetings, side by side in the phone booth. And so there's those kind of cases where people are also using the spaces in ways that you don't expect, and then can you, iterate on that and maybe make it work better for that use case.
And now that you're global, and I mean, every country works different, every culture works different, is a WeWork in China look different than a WeWork in New Orleans? Are there any interesting kind of trends you're seeing within different groups of people as you become a truly like global company?
Well, one of the premises, I mean, when Adam and I started the company, one of the first things we did was we didn't even have a business plan, but we sort of had a stack of paper with ideas on it. And one of those was a map with, dots of the cities that we thought we would be in. And so from the beginning, we felt like we would be global because we felt like the people who unite around these ideas of openness, of connectivity, of collaboration, that they're everywhere. Like that was just fundamental. We believed they were everywhere, and that we could uncover them and bring them together. So once we got to China, we certainly were like, who knows? Like, I mean, we can't prove. I mean, we don't know for sure that there's a market for us. And it was one of the coolest validations. I mean, in this whole adventure was to walk in when we opened the first location in China, and it literally felt just like WeWork. I mean, it felt like, of course, people are speaking Chinese. I can understand what they're saying. But I mean, there was people at the ping pong table. There's people, drinking coffee. There's people hanging out in the common areas. Like the hair color and might be different, but like the vibe was almost exactly the same.
And the ping pong skills might be a little more advanced.
In some cases, yeah, for sure. Although, that's one of the things you find over time that people do unite around things like that, and some of our ping pong tournaments have been some of the coolest ways that we build community. But I would say that that's a really cool thing. Like you go to Mexico City, you squint your eyes and you could be in Shanghai, or you could be in Sydney. And I think that's a really cool thing to imagine. We're all a part of something that's sort of bigger than us, and that there isn't that much that separates it. At least in this group of people, we really share a lot. And it feels good to be a part of that. It feels good to feel the warmth of being a part of that, community, and to have it be familiar,
Very cool. And I feel like there's so much of focus now in technology and startups on culture, company culture. I think Chris Sacco's up here a couple days ago for I think 9 or 10 hours talking about it. But WeWork is interesting because it's a tech company, but it's also a real estate company, a design company, a social network company. You have all different skills, all different people, and you said there's you have 2,000 employees. Like, how do you manage that culture? How do you manage the ethos? How do you make it all work?
Well, yeah, I think it's one of the coolest things about our company is that we are quite diverse. I mean, we started with the premise very early on that we wanted to take as many of the capabilities in-house as we could. So it's not common for a company to have an architecture department, interior design, development, real estate, finance, social media, digital design, engineers. Like we have across, a wide spectrum of talent sets and skill sets, which is really cool from a diversity perspective, but also really challenging because you're dealing with a lot of different cultures and people who are working on in some ways, divergent challenges. And so bringing them together is a really great challenge. And for me personally, about a year ago, I sort of gave up the great majority of my direct responsibility from an operating perspective. So I had before been, really involved in the day-to-day, and I was able to step back and say, what's it going to be like here for the next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? Like, what are we trying to build here, and how are we going to get there? How are we going to become a truly great company? And it all comes down to the people. I mean, it's all about creating a place where the people that walk in every day are excited to be there, that they're engaged with the work that they're doing, that they feel like they're on a path towards self-fulfillment. And if we can create an environment where everyone feels that way, where everyone feels like the company and their journey are aligned, then that's the best case scenario for both of us.
How do you do that? Like in terms of, you guys started like a scrappy, like 10 people in a room, and now you have thousands. Like, is this something you sit down and consciously have meetings about? Do you put people in charge of it? Do you have coaches? Like, people are so messy to deal with. Like, how do you deal with this whole thing as a culture?
I think from what I've learned, and obviously it's shallow in the sense of how much time I've been focused on it so far, but a lot of this stuff, it comes from the top, So when Adam and I first talked about it and said, what are you going to do going forward? He's the CEO. I have a little bit more freedom to try to figure out like what's the most important role I can play. And we came to the conclusion that the best thing that I could do is focus on our culture. And that's a big move for a company to say, a co-founder is going to be totally focused on internal culture. And I think that flows down. I mean, in specific terms, I currently have like an Airtable with 118 initiatives in it that are all related to culture, and they're all related to everything from compensation to vacation policy to day-to-day interactions between managers and employees to rewards and recognition. Like those are the things that I come in thinking about every day and prioritizing and trying to work on. And those are the things that are important to me and the ones that I'll continue to work on for hopefully the rest of my career, because I believe that they're the most interesting challenges that I can personally take on.
Do you look at what other companies out there do you look at as like a model for like this is a big company that has like a great internal culture?
You know, that's a really good question. I haven't done enough work yet to study that. What I've heard on the opposite side is, you know, certainly the ones where people said, hey, blank used to be really cool, you know? Blank was awesome to work for in the past, but now it's gone downhill. That's, you know, what we never want to become, you know? And I think, to me, that's the really great challenge, is you hear those stories all the time. I think we want to be better. I want people to say, you know, we've only improved, and that story never happens to us. That said, I mean, you know, there are certainly companies that, you know, win the best places to work awards, and whether that's a Whole Foods or a Google or you know, there's a company in Montreal, GSoft, that I've just started to understand what they do, and they've been celebrated for their culture, and I'm interested in learning more about them. So I'm just starting to get into that in terms of looking outside. I've been for a long time trying to understand us from the inside, and then we'll figure out how to reconcile those things.
And then, you know, moving on from culture to kind of the business, you were mentioning that you guys are opening 15 locations a month now?
Yeah.
And is that, that's crazy. And is that, like, now going forward the next couple of years, like, is that like a benchmark you want to keep? Do you want to slow it down? Do you want to actually expand it? Like, what's like the plan here?
You know, we're definitely building our ability so that we can continue to grow and to scale. And I think the opportunity, I think, continues to grow with us. And so, you know, as people reevaluate what they think we are and their own relationship to the workspaces that they're in, I think our market can, you know, we're educating and inspiring the market to change. Yeah. And so, you know, I still go back to this feeling that I've had from the beginning when people would say, well, how big is your market? You know, if you look at just Manhattan, you know, you can look around the city, there's thousands of buildings. You know, how many people working in those buildings walk in and say, oh my God, I love this, it's great, it's a beautiful workspace? I think a very small percentage. And I think we're still in that space where we might be 1% of the total number of buildings just in Manhattan. And so I just feel like there's so much room when you look at it as a human condition that we're trying to affect. Rather than just say our business model can apply to this or that, say how many human beings are truly affected in a positive way by by the workspace they walk into every day. That's our game. Like, that's where we want to get to, is to impact as many of them as possible.
And you're expanding like crazy. You guys have raised a ton of capital. Is there pressure to go public? Is there anything on that front happening?
You know, the good thing is we don't have any reason to rush. You know, we're in a great place. We're doing great things. We're growing quickly. You know, all of our financing, you know, the financing mechanisms continue to support us in a way that we can continue to grow. And I think the cool thing is that, you know, the opportunities are there, but we'll be able to choose. I think what's more interesting, you know, for us is to say, what's going to empower us and our members? If that's the right solution at some point, will that improve, you know, our relationship with our members? Will it allow us to support them in more ways? That would be the time when it would say, yeah, it's time to go public. But if not, you know, no rush. And I think, you know, we are looking at how do we do more. And, you know, without being overtly, you know, sound like I'm marketing, you know, I feel like we are doing more every day to support our members. Like, the member experience that someone might have had a year ago is hopefully much better, and it will continue to get better. And that's what we're here for, is to support our members. That's our primary purpose. And,
you know, we have like a minute left. I feel like, you know, tech is changing so quickly. Just people's working habits and commuting habits are changing. What are you seeing in terms of like the future of work? Like, is there major shifts going on, or is it more just headlines and people still do the same thing day to day?
I think it's all about purpose and meaning. I mean, I think people are searching for meaning in their life and in their job, and I think that's the trend. Like, that's the shift that we're tuned into. You know, we feel like that people's lives without meaning are obviously empty, and certainly if you spend 8, 10, 12, 14 hours of your day at work and you don't feel like you know, it's purposeful and that you're doing something, you know, greater than yourself in some way. And so I think that continues to go. I mean, I think young people today are not going to settle for less. And so, you know, one of the things that we've just launched, you know, we have this Creator Awards program, which we're launching, and we've done one event in DC and one in Detroit coming up. And that's really like inspiring and uncovering the people who do have a mission, and we want to figure out how to support them. And I think that's the kind of thing that we see we can get bigger and better at, is saying, yes, we're in our four walls and we support our members, but if we can also reach out to communities and say, hey, we all are, a rising tide when we're pursuing a mission, pursuing a passion. The whole sort of, community is better for that.
I think that's right on time. That's a good spot to end.
All right.
That was fast. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Miguel,
you.
thank you so much.